Good morning, everyone. My name is Reverend Leslie, and I'm one of your senior ministers. This morning, my talk is called Wintering, and it's funny because this very morning, Linda, who is on camera one today, said to me, "Did you hear that it's going to be down in the 30s in the mornings in Arizona this week? We are not used to this cold. We are not used to this cold." And, I moved to Arizona in 1999 because at Christmas time, 1998, I was in Iowa, which is where I grew up, with a toddler and very pregnant. And I looked out at the ice storm that was a-brewing, and I realized that my car had frozen to the road for the second time that winter. And I looked at my husband at the time over my big burgeoning belly, and I said, "I'm not doing this with 2 kids. I'm not shoving 2 kids into snowsuits and snow boots just to have them announce that they need to take it all off and go potty. I'm not doing it. Get me out of here." And we picked the warmest place I could think of, which is sunny Arizona, because I was ready to be done with winter. I was done. I was 24 years old and I was done with winter. Of course, you can run from the snowflakes, but you cannot escape the winters in your own life. This is a truth that I had to learn in the sunny desert, that no matter how far I fled, and I'm telling you, I went as far as I could get without leaving the continental United States. If I'd had a passport, I probably would have been in Uruguay. Set up camp right on the equator if I could have figured out how, but I got to Arizona. And this week, these last couple of weeks, I've been reading a book called Wintering, written by Catherine May. And in this book, she opens it up by talking about a winter of her life that came upon her unexpected, when her husband had an illness. His appendix burst. That's not a giveaway, because it literally happens in the first 2 pages. His appendix burst, and then immediately after that, she had a mysterious illness of no one knew what. And she was forced to slow down and treat her life differently. And in conversation with a friend of hers who was from Scandinavia originally, she realized she was being forced to do what her life in southern England had never forced her to do. She was having to reckon with winter. And I thought, how interesting that we can eliminate the physical factors of winter in our life if we so choose. If we move somewhere like Arizona, we might have a couple days down in the 30s, but we know it's going to be short. But when you live in Scandinavia or the upper Midwest or Canada or huge swaths of Europe, winter is a real season. It takes over your whole life. Everything you do must take into account this extraordinary situation in which you find yourself, where things are not as quick and as easy. You must take into account your environment and your own ability to be well in that environment. And in this book, Catherine draws this parallel between the physical winter of, some skiing vacations and some experiences she's had, and the reports of her friends from Scandinavia, and the very real emotional winter she was finding herself unexpectedly in. And I thought, boy, I didn't manage to escape that kind of winter, did I? I still went through periods of time of financial upheaval, of divorce, of illness, of times of grief. And isn't that the truth for all of us? That winter, to quote Game of Thrones, inevitably, winter is coming. And We can choose to live a life in denial of winter and let it wallop us and knock us flat when it comes, or we can learn to winter with grace. And so that's what today's talk is about, learning to winter with grace. In religious science, in New Thought, we put a lot of stock into creating our own reality. And this is a good thing. This is a good thing. But an unfortunate side effect is that we tend to collectively interpret a winter as something has gone wrong. When we encounter a death in the family, when we encounter a career change that was unexpected and sort of happened at us, when we encounter a long-term illness, what I hear very often and what I have a tendency to think in the silence of my own heart is, I have failed. What did I do wrong? Catherine's book has me thinking about this all very differently as I realize that encountering a winter in our lives does not mean anything has gone wrong. Winters are inevitable. There is no faith, there is no philosophy, there is no practice that is a magical pause button on the remote control of life that means we will never again encounter anything negative. And I'm using air quotes very intentionally here. Anything negative. Because as Reverend Karen talked about recently, she talked about contrast. You know, there's the contrast between what we would like to be having happen, what we would like to be experiencing, and the contrast of what is happening right now. And if we never have that contrast, we never grow. We never shift. We are unable to identify the things that matter to us because we don't have anything to contrast them against. Imagine living in the area of the world where there are months and months and months of straight daylight. This happens in Alaska and in the Arctic regions where there are months of unabated daylight, no night at all. And just let yourself feel for a moment how very exhausting that must be to the physical body and to the psyche. Like, feel into it. We need the cycles of life. We need the highs and lows, the warms and colds, the lights and darks. Our physical bodies need them. The pagan cultures know this. There's a reason they celebrate Yule. They go quieter and quieter and quieter into the darkness through interning practices. And then they celebrate on the very darkest day of the year. They celebrate that the light is coming back. And when we see and recognize that contrast, we have a moment of being really ripped bare, like the bare trees in the winter. And we can see the contrast between where we are right now and where we want to be. And I feel like that awareness of the contrast is what calls forth the next budding. In Wintering, Catherine May wrote, "Life meanders like a path through the woods. We have seasons when we flourish and seasons when the leaves fall from us, revealing our bare bones. Given time, they grow again. Given time, they grow again." In our teaching, we have a phrase. You know everything is going right. You're heading in the right direction, on the right path, when everything just flows. I feel like there's a little bit of a misunderstanding of what we mean by that. Everything flows doesn't mean that everything is easy and nothing ever gets in your way. That wouldn't be life. That would be in Alaska with the sunshine 24/7 for months at a time. What it means is that even as obstacles appear, there is a path through anyway. It doesn't mean we never have to think about it. It means that there aren't walls. There are little rocks in our way for us to maneuver around, but the flow continues. The flow continues. And sometimes we need to be shocked out of the state we're in, into the something new. In Wintering, Catherine talks about an activity that I am here to tell you I am not going to do. But I think life does it to us sometimes. And she talks about ice bathing. Ice bathing. And an interesting reality is beginning to occur in medical science. She has a very dear friend who is from, I believe she said Finland originally, and she was experiencing a protracted experience with bipolar disorder. And she had been through all the meds, years and years and years of treatment, and nothing seemed to really help until she began ice bathing. And there's a theory, I'm not a doctor, but there is a theory that one aspect of mental illness, especially bipolar disorder, is that it's an inflammation in the brain. And so she began literally submerging, even her head, in the polar water for a couple of minutes a day. And she got better. And now she craves it. So Catherine, brave Catherine, went ice swimming with her. And she said it was the most extraordinary thing. She did it. She stayed 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3, and ran. She didn't make it the full 3 seconds she intended. But she said as she stood there on the banks, all bundled up and drying off and warming up, she craved it again. And she went back in and did it again because something in her body felt so invigorated. Something in her knew that she needed to be shocked. Her system needed to be shocked. And winter does that to us. It shakes us up. It shows us, it strips us of all the pretense of who we think we are. And it shows our bare bones, just like it shows the bare bones of the trees when the leaves fall away. So we can see who and what we really are. Our circumstances in life, when they pull at us, what they're stripping from us when we feel, I've lost everything. Maybe you felt that way in your life. I've lost everything. But all we lose is that which was never the essence of who we are in the first place. And so, if we're going to acknowledge that winter is inevitable, how do we learn to cope? Fleeing didn't work. So if we're going to allow ourselves to hunker in and face the winter with grace, the first thing we need to recognize is that the rest is medicine. Things slow down in winter. Things get darker in winter. Everything takes more time to plan and coordinate, and so there are fewer events and more time within. And just as we stand up here and tell you every week that time in the stillness is the medicine we seek, winter forces it upon us. Or we could say it creates an environment in which it is welcome. Up in the far, far north, the Lapland of the world, the Scandinavian countries, they have a way of life called hygge. Hygge, hygge. And it looks like this. And it is this belief that we must welcome winter by getting as cozy as possible. So I'm in my cozy sweater. This is an Arizona girl's version of a cozy sweater. And my snuggly boots. And we light candles and we eat comfort food. And we, as Reverend Karen would say, we snuggle in. We snuggle in. Germany has a very similar phrase, which I will not even remotely try to pronounce. I got the Danish one. We're sticking with it. And in hygge, we recognize that winter has created a container in which we can snuggle in and go within and be comfortable. And we're not just waiting out the cold, we're inviting the experience of comfort and warmth and love and candlelight and sugar cookies and all of the snoogly things of life, not as something that we partake in to make winter more pleasant, but as a necessary aspect of the inward turn of that time of year. When people are having a difficult time in life, hygge is brought forth as well. And there are remnants of it in our North American culture. As Sheldon from Big Bang Theory has told us many, many times, if a friend is in emotional distress, what do? We offer them a hot beverage. When someone is sick, you better believe that someone is going to bring them chicken soup. And when someone is crying, somehow every 4-year-old in the world knows they need a blankie. Why? Why do we need a blankie? We need our hygge. We need our container in which we will inherently be comforted and pull within spiritually, within mentally, within emotionally, because in the rest is the medicine. Ernest Holmes, the founder of our teaching, wrote in Help for Today, "We either use or lose our faith. It's easy to rest in our faith when all goes well, but the real test of a person's faith occurs when life becomes difficult and disaster strikes. It is then that we need to be still and join with the faith of the child who declared in the midst of his misery, 'Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief.'" Entering the hygge phase is tantamount to putting up your flag and saying, "Hey, everyone who loves me, bring me a blankie and a warm beverage. Call me. I'm going to put on my favorite music and my most fluffy, snuggly socks, and I'm going to allow this winter to transform me. I'm not going to shove it out of the way. I'm not going to pretend it's not happening, and I'm not going to run to Arizona or the equator or Hawaii or wherever your favorite runaway spot is. I'm going to sit in this container and allow myself to be deepened by it. If winter is inevitable, then so is the growth that inevitably comes up out of it. Candles are a huge part of hygge. And if you know Reverend Karen at all, you know that 9 times out of 10, her answer to functionally any situation is we should light some candles. We should light some candles. And I can't speak for her experience of why that is so, but something that seems clear to me through my experience of many years of working with her is that lighting the candles is an opportunity to celebrate the light that is. That even in the darkest winter, literal or metaphorical, there still is light. There still is love. There still is beauty to be deepened into, to be celebrated, to be recognized. It can feel small sometimes, but when we choose to reach out for it, it's right there. It's always right there. It's always been true. You know, a disaster came upon the people of Judah in 167 BCE. That is a deserty area, but I am sure that they experienced it as a winter when conquering armies came in and not only took over their homeland, but outlawed Jewish practices. They came into their beautiful temple, their most sacred building, and they put up a statue of Zeus, not the Hebrew god. And they required the sacrifice of pigs, the ritual slaughter of pigs to sacrifice to Zeus. an animal that the Jewish people deem unclean, and completely desecrated their temple, destroyed their basis of their faith. And it was too much. It was the one thing too much for the Jewish people. And an uprising was born out of this insult. And the Maccabean army drove out the people who had taken over the country. And they rescued the Jewish faith. And they decided we must reconsecrate the temple. We must reconsecrate the temple, declare an end to this winter, if you will. Now, the reconsecration of the temple in Judaism means that they must have a special lamp, a menorah, burning day and night. Every night. Never let it go out. And it burns a very special oil that is kosher. It's an olive oil that has been blessed. And this oil is so special, it takes 8 days to produce. And when they went to reconsecrate the temple, they only had enough oil for 1 day. And, you know, here's a winter blast. We are called by our God to reconsecrate the temple by doing a task that we literally don't have the materials for. We're in this impossible conundrum. And they decided, well, we will light the lamp, and we will pray, and we will do what we can, and we're going to get somebody to work making more oil. And at the same time, now it's on God. I have gone to the rock of my truth, of my faith, of my belief. We've lit the lamp, we're saying the prayers, and now it's on God. Now it's on the divine to make this work out. We are in our container. We are trying to rebuild our hygge container. But we can only do so much. And they prayed. And they prayed. And by the time the new oil was ready to come into the temple, they did not have to restart the consecration process. Instead, what they found is that that lamp had miraculously burned for 8 days, and the temple was reconsecrated. The new oil was used to keep the lamp alight for future generations. Hanukkah is a small holiday in Judaism. It's one of the minor holidays. And I've heard some of my Jewish friends kind of joke, it's the holiday of the lamp didn't go out. Woo! But in the moment when the only thing you need is that tiny light to stay lit, to keep the hope of a healthy, happy future before you, it is a miracle that you can find and hold on to the light. It is a miracle that you can turn your attention away from war and pain and death and destruction, and keep your prayers faithful that there is light. It is Hanukkah right now, and I wish a happy Hanukkah to all who celebrate. And I remind each of us, whether we actively celebrate Hanukkah in our families or not, that there are miracles of light all around us all the time. But this is not something that we have to look to another faith to find, that there is evidence in every faith, in every culture, in every country, in every family. Whatever winter is upon you now, if you scan through your life, I guarantee there is light. And so together, New Vision Center, in this freezing front of almost cold enough to create ice crystals of this week, may we create and find hygge in one another, in our families, and in our homes. Bundle up and winter with grace together. And so it is. And so let us deepen with some prayer. How good it is to know that we can always go within, to know that the rest is the medicine, because the medicine for whatever appears to ail us is always right there in indwelling spirit, the center of our own beingness. And as we snuggle in, as we reach into the center of our own beingness, there is a light that is never extinguished in the hearts and minds and eyes of our beloveds, in the depth of spirit, right where we are. There is goodness. And so we can face the winters. We can allow ourselves to slow down and recognize what is truly at the center of who we are. All of the good, all of the love, that everything we ever could need to be to traverse the winters of our life, we already are. And so I know that each of us is blessed powerfully with light and love, with just the right fluffy blanket, with prayer and with meditation, with the winter of our souls and the springs that are always coming. And I call it all profoundly and deeply good. And so it is.